Yeah. Okay, everybody. All right. This is kind of how we've organized it. Is I'll talk more about the ideas, the philosophical piece of it, and then Charla is going to talk a lot about the practical, personal experiences that she has had as a parent and as a teacher, and then also some other parents that she's visited with. So let's dive right into this. Okay, parental grieving process and the emotional impacts. Okay, next slide. And what we'd like is for each of you to review the different types of grieving that a parent or a child may experience. And also it would be great if everybody could learn something new about this grieving process that the parents of the disabled children experience. And then for each of us to resolve to respond to parents with greater empathy and compassion and support. Okay. Okay, next one. Okay, now these are your basic stages of grieving. Many of us have had these in psychology classes, different special education classes. They've been around for several years. And the basic 5 stages are the following. And it's kind of the same stages of dying, experiencing a death. So they are, oh, back again.
Oh, great.
I lost it.
How do I go back?
Go back. I have to read them. I have to read them first.
Really?
Okay, I have a little paper, so I can read off my paper. Okay, but they were, on the previous slide, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Okay, and those are the basic ones, but I liked, oh, you're going ahead. Go back again.
Yeah, sorry. There we go.
Okay, you're on number, go to the red one. Okay, we did that. Okay. Okay. Okay, this gets into a little more depth, and that's what I found in my study was that there's not a certain stage, there's not a certain researcher that is the primo, know-it-all of everything. We're finding a lot of different stages and emotions and opinions.
Martha, now if you're still in the building, could you stop by the office on your way out? Thank you.
Okay. Slight interruption. Okay, but also other negative emotions that can include, but not limited to, sadness, anger, resentment, shock, denial, anxiety, guilt, shame, depression, disappointment, confusion, stress, cynicism, frustration, self-doubt, humiliation, and any combination thereof. And I think all of us can say that we've seen different combinations of this in our experiences over the years with the parents and with the children themselves. And I think I've seen a lot of helplessness with parents, a lot of self-doubt, frustration. They don't always feel up to the task. And so I think that's part of our job to help them to feel competent and to feel comfortable in what they're doing with the children. I remember after a few years teaching in the field, I remember in my naivete that I was surprised that a parent of a 5th grader was still deeply grieving, because in my simplistic mind, I had thought somehow, okay, parent-infant advisors, they're going to run into a lot of parents that are grieving. And the kindergarten teachers, the 1st grade teachers, the teachers of the young children, they're going to experience the most of this with parents because the child is young, it's fairly a recent thing, the diagnosis and all of that. But I found that the older children and parents, they're just cycling through a lot of these things again. And so it was a big realization to me to realize that this parent was not done grieving. And there were kind of new developments and new stages and new insights that the parent was having. And quite often this happens as the child reaches sort of a milestone that maybe they can or cannot achieve, something they struggle with. So it's just something to remember that these things are going on, and sometimes it's under the surface, and we have to just be aware if we don't always understand that a parent is explaining it to us, that maybe perhaps we look on it with compassion that, okay, they're experiencing something, they're going through something, and they may or may not want to tell us, but just treat them with a gentle touch, treat them carefully and gently with what they're experiencing. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This has even more. There's a few different ones in this. You see the denial, anger, and grief again. Number 4 was interesting, a feeling of inexplicable loss. Fear and guilt. They feel guilty for feeling bad about the situation with their child. They think, I've got to love my child. Of course I love my child, but they feel guilty for feeling a sense of loss or frustration. There's confusion, a powerlessness, disappointment, rejection, and some admit that the rejection turned into a death wish. They almost thought it'd be better if the child died or had died, or they want to die. And so it can become even as extreme in that. And it's all negative. It's not all negative. Sometimes, again, they're going through in waves. They're going up and down. They're riding high. They're feeling pretty good. And then they'll drop down into another difficult stage. And they're surprised at themselves and disappointed because they thought they had gotten over it. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, now, this was interesting. I'm going to rely heavily on the next several slides on the research of Ken Moses, because he had a very interesting take that was different than many of the others. He said, regardless of background, people become worse if they resist experiencing and sharing the spontaneous feelings of grieving. Each feeling state, no matter how negative, serves a specific and a helpful function. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. Okay, next one. And then this kind of explains again what I was describing before. Every loss is unique. Not everyone goes through all of the steps or goes through them in a linear fashion. Some steps may be missed entirely. Others may be experienced in a different order, and some may be re-experienced again and again. And I've heard the term cyclical grieving, going through a cycle, a circle. You kind of can go around and around with some of these. So it's not predictable. Because I used to think, again, in my naive mind, that, oh, you go through this stage and then this one and this one. Well, not necessarily. It can change over time. Okay, next one. Okay, now I'm going to have several slides with some of these explanations by Ken Moses, which I thought was very productive and very interesting. He says, I have come to believe that pain is the solution and not the problem. Okay, let's go to the next one. And so what he does is he goes over in these next slides that I'm going to show kind of some of the basic stages and how that can be actually very valuable and can be used. So he says, denial buys the time needed to blunt the initial impact of the shattered dream, to discover the inner strength needed to confront what has really happened, and to find the people and the resources needed to deal with a crisis for which one could not be prepared. So there can be a good positive function to that.
You don't even think about that.
Yeah, comment.
I was just going to say, you don't even think about that, but that is, I mean, when you explain it
Right.
as a time for them to blunt the pain and get resources, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and yeah, anybody who has any comments, please jump in if you'd like, because we're all dealing with this, with the various students and parents. And so yeah, sometimes we think, oh, they're in denial. Well, maybe, again, that's a useful time. Now, here we have the next one, anxiety. Anxiety mobilizes the energy needed to make these changes. Further, it gives focus to that energy so that the changes can be actualized. Anxiety is the inner source of the need to act. So the anxiety, that's okay. We have to validate the person that they can talk about this, they can express it, and then maybe help them realize this is a normal, natural feeling you're having. You don't need to blunt this or feel ashamed of it. What now can you do with this feeling? How can this be a springboard to something else? Okay, next one. Okay, fear. Fear is a warning that alarms the person to the seriousness of the internal changes that are demanded. Fear is the medium that encourages the struggle to reattach, to love again in the face of loss. And I've seen a lot of parents with a lot of fear. And so if they can use that, again, that alarm and that medium to build and to grow from that can be okay. Okay, next one. Guilt is the feeling state that facilitates the struggle to reorder the rightness of the world. Guilt, in this sense, helps one to redefine the issue of cause and the responsibility in the light of loss. And I think that phrase, the rightness of the world, some people, their whole world has been shaken. And so if they're feeling guilty, it can sort of, okay, I've got to reorient myself. I've got to stabilize myself, my life, my family, so that I can get some kind of order in this license, in my life. And so guilt can be, again, an identifying factor that can help with that. Okay, next one. Depression. Depression is the medium that helps parents come to new definitions of what it takes to be a competent, capable, valuable, and strong person, even though their child has impairments that they cannot cure. Okay, so again, how do I become competent? How do I become capable? I feel at a loss. I don't feel as strong as I should be. I'm depressed about it, but how can I, again, use that as a springboard to a jumping point to get a little stronger, a little better. So if they can feel it's okay, you can feel the depression, you can feel sad, but not to wallow in it forever, not to let it consume you and overcome you for any great length of time. Okay, I'm just going to be a little better tomorrow than I was today. I'm going to look at this and notice the strengths of my child. And so we can help them, again, along the path to utilizing these stages. Okay, next one. After depression, anger. Anger is the medium through which a parent redefines fairness and justice. It integrates new beliefs within the deepest emotional levels of the grieving parent. Anger is bad in so many people's minds. It's so bad to be angry. Don't be angry. That's wrong. You've got to be happy. And especially our society is right now in this whole idea we can't send any negative energy out into the world. Well, yes and no. It's okay to feel these things, but then what are you going to do with it? And then again, that comparison of the anger, that it's not fair. Well, we define fairness and justice, and how can we help our children and our family cope, and realizing that sometimes life is not fair. It's not fair that this happened, but how can I use that? How can I better the situation? I had a neighbor of mine who was in her 80s, and she was going through some very difficult health problems. And she said to me something very wise that I've never forgotten. She said, a lot of people say, Rachel, they say, well, why me? And she said to me, why not me? Why not me? I am a human being, and I can experience death and loss and grieving and illness and pain. And I've never forgotten that. I thought that was a very wise thing to realize. We all are facing very different challenges, but we have these commonalities of these emotions that we can experience. Okay, next one. Okay, mobilize and focus the energies. The culturally rejected feeling states of denial, anxiety, fear, depression, guilt, and anger may be used in surprisingly positive ways when the feelings are fully shared. So that first phrase, mobilize and focus the energies. But sometimes people reject it. So we have to be around people who can be okay about this and let us have our rant and our grieving moments and our sad times. But then, okay, and then you don't want to be too much of the Pollyanna of, oh, it's okay, it's all right. Don't want to downplay too much of their feelings either, because I read some of the articles by parents who were very frustrated when people did too much of the putting the silver lining on it. Oh, but. Oh, but she's like this. Oh, but she's like this. So we have to be okay. We have to be okay about validating that's hard for you. This is a hard thing you're going through, or this child is struggling. Okay, and if you try to sugarcoat it too much, that makes them mad. They feel invalidated. At least that's been my experience. And some of these parents, again, like I read about, same thing, difficult thing. Okay, so next one. Okay, I'm going to do several points by Patricia McGill Smith. You are not alone, she says. These are some points, some steps to kind of go through. Points will help a parent. Seek the assistance of another parent. Talk with your mate, family, and significant others. Rely on positive sources in your life. Take one day at a time. Learn the terminology. Seek information. Okay, next one. Do not be intimidated. Do not be afraid to show emotion. Learn to deal with the natural feelings of bitterness and anger. Maintain a positive outlook. Keep in touch with reality. Remember that time is on your side. Okay, and then the next slide. Find programs for your child. Take care of yourself. avoid pity. Decide how to deal with others. Keep daily routines as normal as possible. Remember that this is your child. Recognize that you are not alone. Okay, so those are all really, really good steps. I could go on at length about all of those, but those are all really, really good, that if I even start making a list of these to give to parents and say, where are you in this? How can this help you? Are any of these steps available to you to help? Have you looked at all of this? Okay, next slide. This is a book that was recommended to me by the counselor out in the school in Hilldale, and it's called Tear Soup, A Recipe for Healing After Loss. And this is a great little book. He's given it out to many parents, to many children. And it's a story basically of Grandy, who faced her loss by setting out to make tear soup. And I found it on Amazon. There are many, many copies of this. I'll read just a couple of parts of it. There was once an old and somewhat wise woman whom everyone called Grandy. She just suffered a big loss in her life. Pops, her husband, suffered the same loss, but in his own way. This is the story of how Grandy faced her loss by setting out to make tear soup. And she talks about how is basically a woman every day who has a pot of soup, which is the metaphor for her grieving, where she puts in her tears, her memories, her thoughts. And sometimes she talks about friends coming over to sit down and share the tear soup with her and eat the bowl of soup and discuss things. And she talks about how Pops would do his own way of grieving and she had to do hers. And some of the researchers I studied also, that the father would deal with the grief differently than the mother. As a male, female, different sometimes. Sometimes grandparents would deal with it different than parents would. The child themselves sometimes would be grieving certain losses. They'd deal with it differently. But anyway, this is a great little book, very colorful, and it talks about her making this tear soup, and that maybe she had to go on for a long time. And people said, oh, that you're done with that. You need to be done with that. And she'd say, no, I'm not done yet. And you have to follow your own pattern of coping with loss or grieving or frustrations or everything. And sometimes days would be better, and then sometimes she'd slip into it again. So it's very interesting to look, very, very useful, I found. Okay, next slide. And this is a wonderful thought. Love and enjoy your child. The child comes first. The disability comes second. There's so much to enjoy about all of the children. There's so much good and positive and happy. And it's again, realizing and looking for those things. But then if you're having these difficult emotions, it's okay. You're not a bad, terrible, wicked parent for feeling these things. But how do you deal with it? How do you cope with it? How do you reach out for help? And that you can do that, and that it's possible to grow and develop further in different ways maybe that you're not experienced with. Maybe you haven't thought of these ways before, but the growth and change can help you, and you can do that. So now I think I will, and then my last slides are just the articles that I looked at, some of the main ones I studied. So now let's turn the time over to Charla, and she can tell us more about some personal experiences that she has gone through. She's been very helpful in her life with counseling, and well, not counseling, but talking to other parents and being able to empathize with them. So Charla, you can take it away.